Hi and welcome to this SIAM series where I'm going through various IT management approaches, models, methodologies, activities and practices, and I'll be giving you the main headline points and base knowledge that you need to know. I'll also discuss some of my real world applications of these activities and practices in the organisations I've worked in. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, like and click the bell. Okay, so let's get to it. Today I'm going to be covering off the key concepts in SIAM, Service Integration and Management, and I'm going to be talking around terminology and acronyms that you'll come across within the SIAM world. I've already covered off SIAM layers, SIAM structures, SIAM drivers in previous videos, so please check those out in my channel. Okay, so when it comes to terminology and acronyms, it's good to be clear in terms of terms used. So when somebody refers to a particular term, you get it, you understand where they're coming from and what they mean. We'll start off with some quick fire acronyms that you may come across within the SIAM world, and then we'll go into a bit more detail about some of the other SIAM terms, such as SIAM practices, SIAM functions, SIAM roles, SIAM structural elements, and we'll go into a bit of detail around each element, the SIAM models and the SIAM roadmap. So we'll just cover those in a bit more detail. So let's go through some quick fire acronyms that you may come across. So first off, SIAM. Now that stands for Service Integration and Management. Hopefully you've got that. SIAM methodology. So when we talk about the methodology of SIAM, that's including the practices, the processes, the functions, roles and structural elements. MSI you may have come across, and that stands for multi-sourcing integration. SMI stands for Service Management Integration. SI, Service Integration. SP, Service Provider. SMAI, Service Management and Integration. SI and M, Service Integration and Management. So let's have a look at SIAM practices. So there's 4 practices. When you hear the term SIAM practice, there's 4 bits to this. And those categories are relating to people, they're relating to process, they're relating to the measurement, and they're relating to the technology practice. So we've got 4 practices. People practice, that will be managing people over all the different teams, the cross-functional teams that you would have in the ecosystem. Process, so that would be integrating the various processes across service providers. So you may have multiple service providers, internal service providers, you may have external service providers. The process practice is about integration of processes. Measurement practice, so we would want to try and promote an end-to-end service concept here within SIAM. So it would be reporting on end-to-end services. Technology practices, so a tooling strategy would perhaps be an example there. So if you remember, the tooling strategy is an output of discovery and strategy stage, and that it's created during the plan, the build stage, and you would use governance of solution architecture and assurance. SIAM functions. Okay, so what do we mean by a SIAM function? So each part of the ecosystem is going to have its own structure, its own practices, its own processes, and the service integrator, for example, will have functions that relate to the governance and oversight, the day-to-day management, the integration piece, that collaboration, coordinational activities, the assurance bit. Clearly that's going to be different to, say, the organization, the company organization, or the service providers, whether those are internal service providers or external service providers. So you need to think about what the activities are by each given organizational element within the layers. If you think back to the SIAM layers, you've got the customer organization, which may well be dealing with business relationship management, portfolio, program management, enterprise architecture. So those retained capabilities, and that's the strategy bit in terms of the layer. And then you've got the service integrator, so the service provider management, supplier management, coordination, end-to-end, continual improvement, and that's the integration bit. And then the third layer, which is the service providers, that's the delivery part. So in there you would have the maybe there's application dev in there, or support, or wide area or local area networking services, or some kind of hosting. Perhaps there's a cloud hosting in there, or a local data center. But so when we talk around SIAM functions, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about the various activities and the functions within each layer of the ecosystem. Roles. So it's so important to have clearly defined roles and responsibilities over the ecosystem in order for SIAM to work. And not only that, it needs to work effectively. So a RACI matrix would be something that always springs to my mind when we talk about roles and responsibilities. Let's make it clear who's responsible, who's accountable, who needs to be consulted, who needs to be informed. So for the avoidance of doubt, who is doing what? And this is where this roles and responsibilities piece comes in. It's important that they've been carefully considered and understood what are the different roles, but also roles across different layers. So you need to look at the overall ecosystem in terms of the customer, in terms of the service integrator and the service providers. Where are those roles? Who's doing what? Each layer will have different types of roles, but they need to be defined, they need to be established, they need to be put into place and monitored and improved. So they will be different for each layer of the organization, each layer of function and structural elements. So if we look at the customer layer, just as an example, if you consider the retained capabilities within a customer, so you would have governance and oversight, business engagement, architecture, enterprise architecture, anything strategic, procurement, enterprise risk, contract management. There are roles within those functions that would need to be considered. From a service integrator perspective, you've got service provider orchestration, you've got integration activities, you've got collaboration activities. There are other roles like the SIAM governance lead or the SIAM ops lead, perhaps process owners, roles in governance boards. So when we talk about roles, you need to consider them at each layer. Structural elements. So when we talk about SIAM structural elements, they are activities and responsibilities that work across the various SIAM layers. And these structural elements are almost the glue that connect the functions from each layer into processes, into practices and roles over the entire ecosystem. So you'll see three structural elements. You will see boards, you'll see process forums, and you'll see working groups, and those spread across that ecosystem. So in your head, picture your customer at the top, the service integrator in the middle, if you like, and then the service provider, internal and external service providers, of course, at layer 3. And then spanning all of those, you have structural elements. They are the structure, and they are the boards, the process forums and working groups. And you'll have representatives from each different element within there. So you'll have a service integrator representative or a service provider wherever that's required, and sometimes there's customer organization elements in there as well. It's all about collaboration, it's all about communication over that ecosystem, and collaboration being such an important work there. So the sharing of goals and aligning that to collaboration. Cooperation, you're all working towards the same thing, but perhaps you've got some self-interest in there. Collaboration is you're all working towards a shared goal. SIAM model. So if you hear the SIAM model, the first thing just to be aware of when people talk about a SIAM model is there's no single prescriptive, this is the absolute 100% perfect approach and perfect model. Each organization is going to have a different type of model that's going to suit its own requirements. There's going to be a different scope, there's going to be different outcomes needed, there's also going to be different drivers. So if we think back right to the beginning as to why would an organization want to go into a SIAM model, there are going to be different drivers. So the first point is there's no single definitive, this is the best SIAM model. It absolutely needs to be customized and designed and scoped based on the organization's requirement. There are models, of course there are models, and that there's different types of models. You've got externally sourced integrators, internally you've got hybrids, and you've got lead supplier models, but there's no one size fits absolutely all. If we break that down and just again picture the layers within a SIAM model, you'll have a customer organization at the top, you'll have the service integrator layer, which is underneath the service, underneath the customer, and above the next layer, which is the service provider layer. And within that mix, you've got functions, you've got practices, you've got processes, all touching the various different layers and holding that together. And this is why I think it's such a good word, structural. Holding that all together are structural elements, and those are the boards, the process forums, and the working groups. And then finally, when you hear the term roadmap in the SIAM context, the SIAM roadmap, this is describing the various stages. There are 4 stages in the roadmap, each having inputs, outputs, objectives, and those stages are the discovery and strategy, the plan and build, the implement, and the run and improve. These are the various stages, and the activities within each one helps create and move a customer. It transforms the model to a SIAM model. So once again, the SIAM roadmap, it describes the stages and the activities that you need to get to your SIAM model, basically. And those 4 stages have objectives, inputs, outputs, and those 4 stages are discovery and strategy, plan and build, implement, run and improve. There is a separate video on my channel that discusses these. Okay, that's it for terminology. Please do subscribe and like. I very much appreciate it. Thank you very much.